Hello, everyone. I'm Theo Ishart from Henry Stewart Events, and I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar sponsored by AVP, Selecting Your Next Dam, a step-by-step guide. During the session, please send through your questions at any point using the questions box, which you can open by clicking on the question mark at the top of your GoToWebinar window. Also, a reminder that a recording of this session and the presentation slides will be sent to you tomorrow, so you can watch it again at your own pace. And now it's my great pleasure to pass you over to Cara Van Molsen, Managing Director, Consulting at AVP. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you, Theo. Welcome, everyone. We're really excited that you're here and that you're joining us for Selecting Your Next Dam, a step-by-step guide. As Theo said, my name is Cara Van Molsen, and I'm Managing Director at AVP. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, AVP is a consultancy. We help organizations with all aspects of dams. So that includes planning, selecting dam systems, implementing dam systems, scaling dam systems, optimizing them, kind of the full gamut. So, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Amy Rudersdorf, and Amy is going to be speaking more in just a minute, so I'll kick things off. Amy is a director of consulting operations, and she also leads our dam selection services. So why are we qualified to talk to you about selecting your next dam? Well, we do that a lot. So we help organizations select dams. And so we've been doing this quite a long time. We've helped dozens of organizations select dam systems. And so we've learned a lot over the years, and we're here to share some of our learnings with you today and guide you in hopefully the right direction for selecting your next dam. So the other thing I guess I'll mention is we also see a lot of dam RFPs, and we see a lot of issues where people haven't quite articulated things in the best way. So we want to also help you avoid those things. Before we get started, we have a question for you. So a question. To answer this question, you'll just need to either scan that QR code or go to slido.com. You see the URL there on the left, and enter the code that you see there, 2433006. So we'll ask if you could please, you can do this on your phone, you can do this on a browser, wherever you want. Just go ahead and pop open that screen and then respond to this question. I see a few of you coming in. Thank you so much for joining us with the poll. But yeah, please go ahead and hop in there. We want to know, are you looking for your first dam for your organization? Is this a second dam? You're replacing something that you currently have now? Or, is it the third dam? Or do we not even want to know because you've been through this rodeo a few different times? So we just want to get a sense of where people are in the group. I think no matter what, the information we'll be sharing today should be helpful for any of you, whether it's your first time, your second, third, etc. So thank you guys. Looks like a lot of you are looking for your second dam. So you maybe have something in place today and you're looking to maybe find something that fits your needs a little bit better, but also quite a number of you are looking for your very, very first dam. So exciting for both of you. And for those of you who are kind of been down this path a little bit more than one or two times, we hope to share some tips with you to really find the right fit this time around. Okay, we're going to leave the poll for now. Thanks to those of you who have responded. And I'll just talk about our goal for the session today. So by the end of the webinar, we want you to understand the key steps in finding the right dam system so that you can find a tool that meets your current needs and goals, fits within your budget, and can scale to support your growth for years to come. Implementing dams is very expensive. It's very time consuming to migrate, to choose the right dam, to implement it, to migrate to a new system, or to migrate to your first system. So we want you to be able to scale with the system that you're going to select for many years to come. And bonus, for those of you who are going to be attending the Dam New York conference next week, we want you to be able to have some productive conversations with the vendors at the conference. So we have a little bit of a vendor conference guide toward the end of this session that we'll be sharing. And so we hope that many of you will be attending the conference. We hope to see you there. And we hope this will be helpful as you navigate the event next week. So, but if you're not attending, that's okay. We've got plenty of stuff to choose or to share with you. So here's a few ways we've seen organizations go about selecting their dam. And we would recommend maybe not doing just these things. So just selecting the top pick by Forrester or Gartner, like an analyst firm. Yeah, it seems like the safe bet, but maybe you didn't consider all your options in that case. Or just having IT choose. If you're IT, that's great, but make sure you're getting input from the people who are actually using the system. So IT can lead this process, and typically, or very often they do, but it's important to have the input of the people who will actually be using the system. We'll talk more about that. Just choosing a system that your colleague recommends. It's possible that maybe you're a mirror image of that colleague's company, but it's possible that your use cases are totally different. Your ecosystem is totally different. And so that system they use may not be the right fit for you. Next one. Okay, choosing only based on cost. Now, again, cost is very, very important. But we don't want you to just go out there and pick the cheapest one that you can find on the market. Or choosing the system with the best UI. I mean, I think it's really important to have a nice UI. You want users to want to be in the system, but just because it's a pretty demo, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate to what you need. And then finally, having the CXO, the CMO, the CRO, just go golfing with the damn sales team and then, close a big deal. Again, without the input from the people who actually use the system, because when it's forced upon you from leadership, it's not always going to end up working out. So now, what's important to note is all of these approaches have merit, but the key is that they shouldn't be the only way you go about approaching this and selecting your dam system. We want you to use some of these approaches wisely in combination with each other. So we'll talk more about that. Okay, so we want you to use a smart approach, something that is proven and tested, very user-focused, driven by real organizational needs. We want to make sure you're gathering broad input from stakeholders who are going to be impacted by this change. Don't forget, implementing a new technology is a change management initiative. We want to make sure you're finding the right fit tools by having very clear and well-documented requirements. We want your scenarios, your use cases to be validated to make sure that the fit truly is right. And we want the process to build confidence within your organization, and so that can create trust and lasting results. Okay, so we have on our website a guide, and it's called Everything You Need to Know About Choosing a Digital Asset Management System. The bullets you see below here represent, each of those is an individual article that you'll find on that site. You can go to the URL that's in the bottom right corner, the bit.ly URL there, and we also just dropped that link in the chat. So you'll find a lot of information on this site about building your damn business case, assessing your needs, documenting selection criteria, conducting market research, issuing RFPs, managing demos, and making your final selection. What we're going to do today is kind of a whirlwind tour of this information. So it's all going to be kind of distilled down into some of the key points, but there is a comprehensive set of information on this page. So please do check that out. So the steps, we said this is a step-by-step guide. So the steps we're going to cover today for selecting the right dam system are: 1, engaging stakeholders and clarifying your business needs. 2, prioritizing usage scenarios and key requirements. Keyword, prioritizing. Creating a vendor shortlist, and then conducting comparative demos and POCs. These are places where we see people often make mistakes. And so we want to highlight these steps in particular and talk about some best practices for your approach here as you're choosing your next dam system. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Amy, who is going to walk you through these steps to selecting the right dam system.
Thanks, Kara. Excited to be here today to talk through some of the ways that we perform the selection process here at AVP. So we're going to start with the concept of discovery and engaging stakeholders and clarifying business needs. So who do you involve in this process? We keep saying, talk to your stakeholders, but who are your stakeholders? Well, they're going to come from all over the organization. So the obvious one, you want to talk to your users, your contributors, folks who are going to download from the system. You want to discuss with them the kind of workflows that they have on a day-to-day basis, things that aren't working today, their pain points, their wish list. You want to talk about assets, what kind, where they are, and lots more. This is your key user group that is going to be onboarding into the system. You want to make sure you have buy-in from this group. Obviously, the DAM team, so that may include you to discuss workflows, data volumes, functional needs, typical challenges. We often go in and do these interviews with companies, and the DAM team manages this process, and they forget to interview themselves. So I just want to highlight that this is really important. Don't forget to interview yourself. You're going to need to talk to leadership. These are the folks with the money. They understand the business goals and priorities. So you want to make sure they're on board with this idea. You also need to understand your budget. Even if that's a rough order of magnitude, you need to have that information further in the process when you're actually creating a short list of vendors. Don't forget IT. They're the ones who are going to help you figure out your technical requirements. Cloud vendors, constraints, integration needs, SSO, those are all the kinds of information you're going to want to talk to your IT department about. And then finally, procurement and legal. If you're going to go out for RFP, you definitely want to talk to your procurement agents, because they know how to do it. They may want to do it, and you don't want to get in trouble with them. Also, your legal department may have issues around rights clearance or other legal concerns that you should take into consideration as you're moving forward. Okay, so you have this list of people. What's the goal? What do you want to achieve through these conversations? Well, the first thing you want to do is uncover pain points. So you need to understand what isn't working today. What is failing? Where are the gaps? Where are the points where people have to communicate or shift things around manually? Those are your pain points. Your users are going to know them because they live with them on a day-to-day basis. You need to understand your assets. When you're going to vendors and asking them for a quote, they need to know how much data you have and what types of assets they are. So for instance, you may have 5 terabytes of data and say to a vendor, give me a quote for 5 terabytes of data. And they're going to say to you, well, what kind of assets are those? Because the reality is that if you have 5 terabytes of video and 5 terabytes of PDFs, that's a completely different, those are completely different requirements. The system's going to manage those in different ways. So the vendor needs to know that kind of thing. You want to help through this process to define what success looks like. Talk about the dream system. What do your users' wish lists look like? If you could give them a magic wand, what would they ask for? This is all really important. You're going to uncover interesting requirements or at least desires for the system. And as we've said already, you want to include all voices. You want to capture the needs across departments and roles. If you're going to roll this out to your company over a series of years, starting with one department and moving to other departments, you want to include those other departments in your discovery process, because you're going to need to serve them in a year or two down the road. You want to make sure that this system, if it can't do what it needs to do today, that it's on the functionality that they need is on the roadmap. And then this process is also about building alignment and buy-in. Kara said this is change management, 100%. And to do this, you need to document what you're hearing so that everyone can review and agree on it. You can use this to give to your administration so they see what you're doing. Everybody knows what's happening, feels involved, feels included, and will buy into the process. Okay, so you've gathered all this information, and now what do you do with it? Well, we want to prioritize. We're going to document and prioritize that information, and we're going to do that through two mechanisms. One is called usage scenarios, and the other one is called requirements. So why are we documenting these things? We want to make sure that we're defining at a very deep level what the system can do functionally, technically, and what our business goals are. So requirements are going to define what the system does. We also want to document usage scenarios because they define how the system does it from the user's perspective. So already we're telling vendors not just what we need, but how we need the system to do it based on how our users need to work. And keep in mind that usage scenarios are told from the future tense and not the present tense. We don't want to talk about how processes work today. We want to talk about what processes will look like in the new system. And you need to build those usage scenarios grounded in real workflows. You're going to get those workflows from your discussions with your stakeholders. And then really narrow down your priorities and deal breakers. We see clients that want 10, 15 usage scenarios. Really, you want to narrow that down to your true priorities, probably no more than about 8 usage scenarios. And then write everything down with an emphasis on clarity. These are folks you're going to be communicating with who do not understand your organization or your situation. They're going to make assumptions if you aren't clear about context and the reality of your situation and your dream or future requirements for the situation. Write it down and write it like you're writing it to someone who has no idea what you're talking about. Okay, so I've talked about documenting everything, but how do you do it? So let's start with requirements. I'm going to show you 3 different types of requirements. So the key requirement I want you to just like absorb today is the functional requirement. So the functional requirement defines what the system must do to support a user's task. At AVP, we write functional requirements as user stories, which actually comes out of the sort of development world. And so here, the user story tells you who is doing something, what they want that system to do, and why. Context, so important. As a DAM admin, I want to bulk edit at least 10,000 metadata records at a time so that I can quickly update large sets of records. This is a measurable requirement that only asks for one thing and explains who needs it and why. A technical requirement is different. It is going to define the technical specifications or constraints that enable that functionality. So an example is that the system must be deployed on our organization's Azure environment. So now we're talking about storage and the technical requirement in order for the DAM to work. And then finally, business requirements. You're going to pull back, think about the forest and not the trees. The trees are your requirements. The business requirement is your forest. Here, we're tying our goals, our requirements to organizational goals. So if we think about that functional requirement, bulk editing at least 10,000 metadata records, we're going to pull that back to a business requirement that says improve staff efficiency and reduce backlog by enabling faster metadata management. This is all information you want to share with vendors so that they understand your situation, your context. I'm going to give you some examples of some good, bad, and ugly functional requirements. So the first one, only use drop-down menus for metadata entry. Do y'all know why you wouldn't do this? It's because this dictates the solution, the drop-down menu, instead of the need, which, as we've said in the previous slide, was consistent data entry. So this prevents vendors from showing alternative and possibly better approaches than just drop-down menus. we would recommend you write something like this as an administrator, I want to enforce controlled vocabularies and taxonomies so that metadata entry is consistent and reliable across users. Now the vendors can say, oh, we can do that, and here's how. Fast uploads and downloads, this is not measurable. Every vendor is going to say they do it, and there's no way for you to verify whether or not it's true. So instead, we want to use measurable requirements. So as a user, I want to upload assets up to 20 gigabytes in size with resumable support so that large video files can be ingested without interruption. So here we want to upload really big files, and if they fail, they're going to restart. And then finally, the DAM should manage metadata so my assets are findable. Well, this is so vague and generic. This is what DAMs do. So we want to instead understand the specific capabilities the DAM must provide. So without that, you can't test this and you can't compare it across vendors. So instead we say, as a user, I want to search and filter assets by multiple metadata fields, e.g., so that I can quickly find the specific assets I need without browsing through the entire collection. Again, we know who needs it, we know what they need specifically, it's measurable, and we know why. All right, usage scenarios. So I've been saying usage scenarios. You may think use case, that you would normally write a use case for this process. We understand and think that use cases are valid. They are concise, they're system focused, they're clear and testable, but they don't provide that context I keep mentioning. So here's an example. When a DAM admin searches for assets by keyword, the system returns relevant results with filtering options. That's fine if you want to go that approach. This is what we recommend though. Oops, sorry. Usage scenarios. So these are narrative, workflow focused, user focused. A DAM admin, there's the user, receives a request for photographs from 1985. She logs into the DAM, searches using 1985 as a keyword, applies a date filter, reviews thumbnails to confirm relevance, and exports a curated set of images to share with the marketing manager. This is a workflow. This is something the user has to do. These are all the steps. It shows real-world context, highlights and reveals hidden needs like filtering or exporting, and it tells a story that the use case simply doesn't. So and keep in mind, as you're writing these are going to be more than just what you give to the vendor. They're going to be used for internal alignment. We all agree this is the workflow for those vendor proposals, as I mentioned, but also use them in demos and in your implementation guidelines. All right, another poll for you. We're going to do it the same way. The number is different, but this one is, have you documented your DAM requirements and usage scenarios? If you could please respond. Not yet. Ooh, partially. That's great.
You shouldn't have to, your screen should still be showing the same thing, so you shouldn't have had to do anything.
All right, it looks like folks have either partially, which sounds like most of you, documented your requirements and usage scenarios. Some of you haven't gotten started. Great, now you know how to do it. And then some of you have already done this work, so that's fantastic. It's not easy, it's a lot to do. And it takes a lot of engagement with your community and ensuring that you're documenting their needs well. All right, so let's move on to the vendor shortlist. So we recommend that you do your vendor research. You want to figure out which vendors work for you. There's lots of information, there's lots of sources. So let's talk quickly about those. The first one I want to mention is analyst firms. So here we're talking about Real Story Group, Forrester, Gartner. You've seen the quadrant, the Gartner quadrant chart. The limitations of these firms is that they really are limited to established vendors. So you're not going to get a full understanding of the full suite of DAM vendors out there. You'll get a highlight of sort of the most prominent. Also, these are not necessarily free resources. You may have to pay, although you can often find the Gartner chart on DAM vendor sites, especially those that are ranked high. Industry events. Many of you are headed to Henry Stewart next week. There's also a Henry Stewart in LA, in London, in Australia. So conferences like this are really great for information gathering and learning, but not all vendors are in attendance, and it's very busy. There are marketplace sites too, like damvendors.com and G2. I do hesitate that it's important to understand that not every technology on those sites is an actual dam. So you do need to do your research as you're looking through them. News sources are a great place to look too. Dam News, if you're not familiar with it, is a great resource. CMS Wire, LinkedIn, and Reddit. None of these are comprehensive, but they, again, in combination with these other sources, will give you a full source. Obviously, you want to talk to your colleagues, peers at similar institutions, but keep in mind, as Kara said earlier, context is everything. Just because something's great for a peer doesn't mean it'll work in your environment. And then, of course, there are DAM experts and consultants like AVP. We know we're working and thinking about this all the time. We talk to vendors all the time. And so we really know this market and can put together shortlists for you. Obviously, there's an associated cost with consultants. All right, so things to consider as you're putting your vendor shortlist together. Think about the location and time zone of the vendor. If the vendor's in the US and you're in Europe, is that a problem? If they are in the East Coast and you're on the West Coast of the US, is the time zone compatibility for support and communication, is that going to work for you? Be sure to ask those questions. Pricing insights, we've talked a little bit about this. Pricing is really hard to pin down at this stage. So you really want to aim to capture general ranges or rough orders of magnitude. You're just not going to get specific quotes from vendors in many cases. Some of the lower priced vendors do have their pricing on their websites, but most do not. Think about the primary industries served. If you're in cultural heritage and the vendor is really a marketing dam, is that going to work for your organization? Will they understand your goals? It's important to think about whether or not that dam vendor is working in your sector and can really understand what you're trying to do. Preferred storage platform. It's interesting because there are vendors that only work with one storage platform, like Azure, so Microsoft shops. If you have to have your storage on AWS, this is definitely a question you want to be asking the vendors. Can they do that? Also, if you have your own environment, Azure environment, instead of an environment that the vendor stands up for you, can they handle that? Those are the kinds of things you want to make sure you're thinking about. And then also strengths and weaknesses, summarize the key pros and cons that you find and how they align or conflict with your requirements. It's also good to understand their clients. Do they serve institutions that are similar to you in size or type or mission? Again, that goes back to the primary industry served. Will they understand your goals? And then, it's always good to hear user reviews and feedback. What do users report about reliability, usability, and support, and anything else? I think they're going back to the G2. Also, Reddit has some really good resources, believe it or not. Okay, so you have all these characteristics and factors to consider. Now you're going to put your short list together based on the decisions you've made from those factors. You want to make sure that those vendors, usually between 3 and 6, meet your requirements and fit within your budget. If you've ever watched that house hunting show with the Property Brothers, they'll say, tell me all your dream, what you want in a dream house. And then they show the buyers a dream house and it's like $1 million more than they can pay. Like, don't get yourself in that situation. Figure out what your requirements are, figure out what your budget is, and then find the best solution for your budget. Don't go chasing systems that you just know you can't afford. You're just going to be sad. Okay, so at this point, you're either going to do an RFP or you're not. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why an RFP is a benefit and why not doing an RFP might be a mistake. So first of all, an RFP, a request for proposals, is a formal process. It's a documented process. It often goes through the procurement department for purchasing technology. So in order to, it may seem onerous or like more work than you want to do, but an RFP really can be beneficial because it provides a structured and transparent selection process. And transparency is going to be really important if this process is going to be audited or you need to defend your decisions. Keeping it as neutral as possible is going to be important. It also ensures fair vendor comparison through standardized responses. So if everybody gets the same questions, generally they'll give you answers that align with those questions. So you can start to do an apples to apples comparison. It will help align stakeholders on requirements and priorities. Again, it's documented, they can see it. We all agree this is what we're trying to acquire. It also creates, as I said, a formal record for accountability for legal, procurement, or budget reasons. And it can really strengthen the negotiation leverage with vendors. You have said to them, this is what I need. They have responded to your proposal saying, this is what we can do. And now when you go into negotiations, you can say, hey, remember you said you can do all these things. So we expect you to do them. And, you can now hold them to it. So maybe you don't want to do an RFP, which is, your choice. But what we would say to that is that this is a less structured evaluation. You're gonna risk missing key comparisons. You no longer have that sort of apples to apples comparison. Now you're just sort of seeing what's out there and inviting vendors you think might work without really understanding the systems themselves. It can definitely introduce bias and inconsistency. And there is much less documentation for those future references or audits. And then finally, it can be harder to justify decisions to leadership or funders if you don't have documentation around your decisions. So documentation is definitely something that we strongly recommend. And Kara has dropped into the chat our RFP guide. It includes everything you're seeing today, as well as documentation on how to put those RFPs together. All right, we're going to wrap up our process here with conducting comparative demos and POCs. A POC is a proof of concept. I'll explain that in a second. But first of all, I want to talk about vendor demos. So it is imperative that you perform this step in your selection process. After you've gone through the proposals, because you've done that RFP, right? And you have your comparisons, apples to apples, you can now say, all right, this vendor does what I need, this vendor does what I need, and this vendor does what I need. I would like to see demos from these 3 vendors. We strongly recommend you don't watch more than 3 vendors. Really, again, prioritize your needs, prioritize those vendors. So when you're doing a vendor demo, always use your own assets and metadata. Give the vendors representative examples of your day-to-day assets so you can see how those assets work in their system. And include with those some challenging files. Remember that 20 gigabyte video I talked about earlier? Send that to them, see how that works in the system. Otherwise, odd formats. If you are in digital preservation, you may have old formats. Give them a couple of those so you can see what those look like in your system. And then you want to tie the demo to your usage scenarios. So you've written those up to 8 usage scenarios. Choose 3 or 4 that are, again, your priorities, and ask the vendors to demo those during the demo process. Have them walk through those workflows and show you exactly how they work in the system. This ensures that you're seeing the system solving your problems and not just a canned demo, because they will come with a canned demo if you let them. Give yourself enough time to evaluate. I can't say this strongly enough. Plan for at least 2 hours, including Q&A. You are about to embark on a major selection process. You're going to be investing a lot of money in this. I always say that you're not just buying a system, you're marrying a vendor. Make sure that you want to be married to this vendor for the next 5 to 7 years. And so spend that time with them. It's better to spend the time up front than to be sorry later. And make sure you have time to ask your questions and dig into the details you need. And then finally, documentation, keep a scorecard, capture your feedback during and after the demo. If you can create scores based on, say, the usage scenarios, how well did they respond to the usage scenarios on a score from 1 to 5? Now you have quantitative data that you can actually use to help, if not make the decision, support the decision. And then this is our actual vendor demo agenda. We use this for nearly all of our vendor demos, and you can see how it works out. The vendor does get to give you a little bit of a canned demo at the beginning, but then they spend a full hour on your usage scenarios. So make sure that you, if nothing else, ensure that they're using your usage scenarios for the demo. And then finally, don't skip the proof of concept. A proof of concept is a time-limited trial of a DAM system configured with your assets, metadata, and users in mind. It allows you to validate whether the system can meet your real-world needs. And you do this before you make your final decision. You go through this proof of concept and the system doesn't work at all. At least you have those other demos that you saw, and you could perhaps go back to those, find another demo, and do another proof of concept if you need to, until you find the system that really works for you. So if you're doing a proof of concept, which we strongly recommend, allow it to at least 2 weeks. So anything shorter than that, you're not going to really get to know the system. It's going to be rushed. The testing won't be complete. Anything longer than that is you're just going to end up wasting your time in the system. So 2 weeks is the sweet spot. Test with real assets and user roles. Again, make sure in this proof of concept that the vendor is going to set up for you, that they load your assets and your user roles. So content creators, admins, content users, make sure that they understand your roles and your assets are uploaded. Use a scorecard. Again, quantitative data is really useful in supporting your decisions. And, procurement may require it. So just better to do it than not do it and be sorry later. We recommend that you provide everyone who's going to be involved in the POC a script of tasks. This is a guided evaluation that will produce comparable results that are consistent. Otherwise, your users are just going to go in and click around, and that's not really an assessment. They're not going to be able to tell you how the system works based on your needs. All they're going to say is, I don't know, I could find stuff, I guess. And then hold a midpoint check-in with the vendor. So once you've been in the system for a week, meet with the vendor and make sure that they are there to answer your questions. And that will also keep your testers engaged. At the midweek, they're like, oh, shoot, I only have a week left. And then as you're doing your assessment, you've done your RFP, you've done your demos, you've done your POC, you want to create criteria and evaluation and scorecards that are going to help you to make sure this vendor is the right one. So this is an example of criteria you might use. I mentioned earlier the score of 1 to 5, based on how well the vendor performs the demos. There are lots of different ways to do it. If you check out our RFP document, there are some guidance sections there on evaluation. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Kara.
All right. Well, that was a whirlwind. So we did cover a lot. Thanks you, Amy. And as we've mentioned and shared links in the chat, so all of this information you can find in our guide to selecting the right DAM system. There are many articles in there. You'll find a lot more detail about everything that we've been talking about today. So before we close, I want to talk for just a minute about the Henry Stewart DAM New York conference next week. It's on Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. That is a week away. So For those of you joining, we have one more question for you. This is the last poll question, but we want to know what your goal is for attending the event. So I'm not seeing the poll on the screen though. Can you go to that? Thank you. Okay. All right. So for those of you attending the conference next week, what's your main goal at the conference? Are you going to attend the workshops, presentations, just deepen your damn knowledge generally? Are you hoping to talk to vendors to learn more about their products? Are you hoping to talk to vendors about your very specific needs? Or are you just going for the free swag and happy hours, etc.? You can answer, more than one response. So you can choose as many as you like. You're not limited to just one. So looks like a few of you are going to be talking to vendors. Yeah, if anyone else, I'll let this stay up for just a minute while you respond. Some of you just want the free swag. That's cool. That's what I go for. Yeah, you can get some good stuff, especially if you have kids. Definitely some good stuff for them. Some stuffed animals.
What's our swag, Kara?
Huh?
What's our swag?
Oh, we have some lovely mugs, and if you're a really lucky winner, you might get a coffee, like a thing of coffee with it. We also have some really cool shirts that say Metadata, but it's like in the Metallica font. So those are pretty awesome. Come check our booth out, and you might be able to get some of our cool free swag too. Okay, so we're going to continue on. So I'm mostly talking to those of you who are going to be visiting with vendors while you're at the conference now, but just in general, hopefully this is useful information. This is the vendor hall map for next week's event. So if you've been to the conference before, you kind of know what the layout looks like, but for you first-time attendees, this is a room where a lot's happening. So you've got all the vendor booths set up, the exhibit hall here, and then this is also where you're going to be having your breakfast and your lunch. So you see the catering tables there, and all those other white tables are like where you're going to be sitting. So it's a busy room. You have a lot of time in this room between sessions, during breaks. So there's a lot of networking, but it's also an opportunity to meet with a lot of these vendors who are going to be there. So I want to point out a couple of things. On the right side, you see the exhibitor key. You can also get the list of exhibitors on the DAM New York website. I would recommend looking these folks up before you go, because many of them are DAM vendors, but some are not. So it'd be good to know kind of who's who and who does what prior to the event, just so you know who you might want to talk to and maybe who you don't need to talk to. So that's one tip. So just keep in mind, there's a lot of vendors here, but not all vendors are here. So there may be some vendors that you're interested in that are not going to be at the event. So it's not entirely exhaustive, but you have a great opportunity to meet with a lot of different vendors at this conference. It's a really good event for talking to them. But I also want to go back to a point that we talked about earlier, which is just that there are wildly different price points represented by some of these DAM platforms in this room. So you do want to, like I said, do some of that research ahead of time, see like who might be within your budget range. And if that's something you're not really familiar with, or you're not going to be able to figure out ahead of time, it's something you can kind of get a sense of from conversations there. So yeah, just do a little research as much as you can so you can be prepared. And so we can go to the next slide. We just have a few tips for you, as you're coming to the conference. Bring those requirements and use cases with you, have them written down, have them printed out. It'll be easier to have those conversations so that you can even show vendors like what you're trying to accomplish. Bring a pen or a way to take notes so that you can capture impressions immediately, because an event moves really, really fast. And if you don't write things down, you may at the end of the day find yourself going, who was it that said they could do that thing? I can't remember. So yeah, it's good to have a way to take notes. And we've created a guide for you that you can feel free to use. This is just some screenshots, and we're going to put the link to this in the chat. It's a Google Doc, so it's just a little bit of a vendor conversation guide. You have a template you can use to capture your top priority requirements, use cases, and then a place to take notes. So if you want to use this or replicate this, this is just a way to kind of help you prepare for those conversations. So there's that bit.ly link on the screen and also in the chat. If you're using it as a Google Doc, just make a copy. If you're going to be downloading it to Word, you can just go to File, Download, and then choose Word. So hopefully that's straightforward enough for everyone to access and use. And then go to the last, the last bit on the tips for vendor conversations. So like I said, you'll be in this exhibit hall with a lot of folks milling around during the breaks. And that might not be the best time. Oh, that's the wrong link. Okay, we'll have to fix that. Somehow we gave the wrong link. Apologies. So we'll get that going, and then I'll just talk through this real quick. So you may want to schedule some time ahead of time so that you can have like a really nice sit down time with the vendors so that they're able to kind of focus on your needs a little more. If you just show up during those break times, it's going to be real busy, and you might not have time. You're sharing the demo space with many people at that moment, so it's hard to ask them to show you the things that are specific to your needs. So if you do schedule some time with them, that'll give you more opportunity to meet with them during a quiet moment. And then keep going. So yeah, make sure you talk to any vendors, just get a lay of the land. There's some interesting companies, interesting platforms in the room. We've been saying over and over, you want to request demos that are tailored to your workflows, not just their standard presentation. So you can, if you have especially that extra time scheduled, you'll be able to have a better opportunity to do that. And the next one is that we recommend that you can start asking for customer references in similar sized institutions or similar industries as to your situation, as we mentioned before. So you can start to ask those questions there. Make sure to ask questions about your specific needs. And then finally, clarify the pricing models while you're there so you can understand like what's included, what's extra, and how pricing is structured. So is it based on seats? Is it based on, the number of users? Is it about storage? How else, what are the other ways in which they approach the pricing and what's included in that? So just, if you can, try to get a sense of that. That will be easier if you have that kind of one-on-one time scheduled in advance. All right, and last but not least, we want to invite you to meet up with us at the AVP booth. If you want to get some tips, guidance, you want us to point you to the right DAM vendors to go talk to, stop by our booth. We're going to have a little DAM selection meetup on the first morning during the breakfast time. So that's from 8 to 9 a.m. next Tuesday, October 14th, day one of the conference. Look for me or John Horodisky. You can see him pictured here. And we're going to be around and available to help you with that shortlisting within the vendor hall. So if you're like, hey, here's my situation, this is what I'm looking for, here's my use cases, who should I talk to, or here's my budget, we can kind of point you to the right vendors and even go over there and introduce you if you'd like. We know almost all of them. So we're happy to take you, introduce you, and if you just want a buddy to help you out during those conversations, we'll be available for that too. So come and find us. You don't just have to come at that time, but that is the time. Okay, that is it for our quick and dirty how to select a DAM, the steps to selecting the right DAM. We want to make sure we save time for questions, which we have about 10 minutes left. If you have any questions after this, please contact Amy and I. Here's our LinkedIn information, and we'd love to connect with you anyways, whether you have questions or not. So please reach out, connect with us if we're not connected already. And if you ever have questions anytime, we're happy to answer those, not just right now. So we're going to stop here. We're going to turn to questions. And I have a few here that have already come through. So we're going to go ahead and start with those. Please type your question in the questions panel in the GoToWebinar, so we'll get access to them. Okay, so Amy, question for you. Is there a cost associated with a POC?
The answer is maybe. So it depends on the vendor. It depends on what you're asking for. Most vendors don't love POCs, but they also recognize that they're really important. So they will often do them for you. I've found that more complex and larger vendors do require some sort of layout of cash. It can be like $10,000 that is a credit, so that if you do purchase their system, they give you that credit. They give you that $10,000 back in credit. It really depends on the vendor. You know, I hate to give you that answer. It's like maybe, and it depends, but it really is probably more associated, cost or payment is more associated with larger vendors, I guess is the answer I would give you.
But those are also likely to credit that if you end up
Yes.
purchasing theirs. Okay. All right. So we have another POC related question. So I'll go to that one. How do you assess integrations with a POC since you can't really test those? What do you recommend?
Yeah, so that's really hard. And you're right, the vendors are not going to set up an integration for you to test in the POC. I would recommend, if you have skills, in engineering skills or API skills, and you have engineers on staff, as part of the POC, get access to the API and play with it. If it's a decent API and it's easy to use, you'll get a sense of whether those integrations will work. The other thing I'll say is that a lot of vendors now have integrations out of the box. So again, it depends on your vendor and the system you're integrating with. I'm seeing lots of integrations with, Canva and Adobe Creative Suite, and then some of the CMSs and, systems like Salsify, or, there are a lot of sort of built-in integrations. So I would say two things. One is engage an engineer to check out the API, and two is to research what integrations they have out of the box. But you're right, that will be an unknown if you move forward with that vendor in many cases.
Yeah, especially if it's a custom integration, they don't have an out of the box. The other thing you can check, in addition to the kind of, I also strongly recommend checking out the API, getting someone to test the APIs and review the documentation. But some vendors have like a connector framework as well. So there may be even GUI interfaces for building connectors building workflows for integration. So that may be something you can test if that's an option. But those are good recommendations there. Okay, we have another question, which is, what is the primary reason you believe so many initial DAM implementations fail? What do you think, Amy?
Oh, you're going to give this one to me? Well, I think there are several reasons. I think a big one is lack of adoption. I think if your people aren't using your DAM isn't working. And so going back to that discovery period where you're engaging with your users, really understanding needs, understanding what's really bothering them, and then documenting that and getting a system that addresses those issues. And then you do the appropriate training and onboarding and change management to support those users in this completely new world they'll be living in with totally new workflows. It's really about ensuring their comfort in the system and supporting their use. That to me is the key. But there are many other factors that Kara is going to talk about right now.
All right. Well, I'll give you a couple more. I think that's a really, really crucial one. And it does tie back into the selection process, because if you kind of got the selection process wrong, then you may have those adoption risks when you get to the implementation process. Now, there are cases where those are kind of mutually exclusive, and you can still screw up the implementation, even if you get the selection right. And then you end up with a tool that's like great, and it really is a great fit for your use cases, but nobody's using it because you botched the implementation. So that's like a whole other webinar, which we have done before on how to foolproof your DAM implementation. But I'll just go back to like maybe what we were talking about earlier around requirements and use cases and usage scenarios. So because we deal also a lot of implementations, we do get to see the RFPs that come out that people issue for dams, and we get to respond to the services aspects of a lot of those. And I'm just going to be honest, some of them are horrible. I mean, they're just really, really bad. So those examples of requirements that Amy was giving, that they're just kind of lists of like 2-word things like drop downs, create videos. We don't know what that means. Like what is create videos? I'm not even sure. So things like that, where you just see these kind of like very brief, no context, not prioritized. That's the other thing. We'll see stuff with use cases in them, but they're not really prioritized. So it's really unclear what they expect on day one from the implementation versus what's going to be maybe a couple years out. And there's also way too much in those RFPs to really reasonably try to accomplish in a short or a reasonable amount of time for an implementation. So biting off way more than you can chew is another big reason why we see dam implementations fail. We see a lot of these are issued with 15 integrations saying they're required, but it doesn't say whether all of those have to be in place in year one. And if there is a goal to get those integrations in place in year one, there may not be a recognition of the budget that is required to make that happen. So prioritization and like some reality checks are also things that I think people kind of don't quite get. They don't quite get right, and that can cause failure and big delays in the implementation and launch. Okay, so we have another question. Storage costs associated with dam feels like hidden costs. Interesting. How do we ensure storage costs are transparent for long-term budgetary considerations during dam selection? So I'll start really. Oh, you want to? Okay, I just didn't want to put it on you again, but go for it.
No, I want to talk about this, and it's something I mentioned earlier in the presentation, and that's you have to give the vendors real data so they can give you a real quote on the storage costs. So they're not going to hide storage costs from you, but they're going to guess if you don't tell them. We had an RFP come in and they said, give us a cost for storage. And then when you actually go to the place where the storage cost information is available, it was supposed to be available in the RFP, it said it's too hard to assess. Well, that's going to be a really hard thing for the vendors to give you a cost on. So when you go out for RFP, you must say, this is how much storage we have today. This is the kind of storage we have. These are the formats. And then this is our growth year to year. You don't have to be perfect in this, but at least then the vendor has a sense of what your growth looks like over time. The good news is all of these cloud vendors are usually billing you for storage as you use it. So they'll give you a quote for 5 terabytes, but if you're only using 3 terabytes, they will typically just bill you for those 3 terabytes. So that's good. But your costs, storage costs, it's on you to give the vendor the correct information to ensure you're getting the correct storage costs. But I think vendors are becoming much more transparent about that. So and what we're seeing more and more is that they're providing pass-through costs from AWS or Azure.
Yeah, but that's what I mentioned, like find out their pricing model, because if storage is a major factor in the pricing, just, hopefully you learn that early, how that factors in, and do they have tiers, or is it just pass through, or is it as used? And then it does come down to, well, what your storage needs. All right, y'all, we are at time. We are 1 minute over. Thank you so much to everyone who's kind of hung in there with us and stuck it out to the bitter end. Hopefully we've answered some of your burning questions. But if you have more questions, again, reach out to us on LinkedIn. Come see us next week at the Henry Stewart event in New York. We really look forward to meeting you there. And best wishes for your next dam selection. We hope you find the perfect fit for your organization. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Amy and Kara, for delivering this webinar today. And thank you all for joining us. If you're going to DAM New York next week, don't forget to visit the AVP booth and meet the team. And also a reminder that you'll receive the link to the recording tomorrow, so you can rewatch this session at any time. And finally, if you'd like to further your DAM knowledge, be sure to explore upcoming events and online courses on the Henry Stewart website. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.